LSU's new defensive line coach gets a huge vote of confidence, literally and figuratively. Let's talk about it. Locked on LSU. Let's go.
You are Locked on LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Okay, let's get it. It is Locked on LSU, your team every day. I'm your host, Matt Moscona. Thanks so much for making us your first listen. We are free, available wherever you get podcasts, of course, on YouTube as well. So please subscribe. As always, one of the fastest ways to help us grow is by leaving your comments below. So thank you so much for that. Today's episode is brought to you by the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. Stay with us for the Armada Team of the Week later in this episode. LSU baseball is back at the box against UNO. Kim Mulkey updates the health status of her two biggest stars. Brian Kelly explains his reasoning for changing the spring game format, but here is LSU is making its way through spring football. Of course, the dead period in recruiting has been lifted, so you're having recruits and commits alike come to campus for unofficial visits. And I learned over the weekend that one of LSU's biggest commitments, both literally and figuratively, was on campus to meet with new defensive line coach Kyle Williams. That would be, of course, Richard Anderson. So if you're not familiar, let me give you a little bit of the backstory on Richard Anderson. I'll tell you what I know because I was able to have a conversation this weekend with Richard Anderson's high school coach, Bryce Brown at Edna Carr, who accompanied Anderson on the visit to Baton Rouge for a 2-day unofficial visit. I'll get to that in just a second. So if you're not big into recruiting or you're not familiar, Richard Anderson is a massive defensive lineman from Edna Carr in New Orleans. He is committed to LSU. He committed back in June of 2024. He is big. He is listed at 6'3.5", 335 pounds. Remember, this is a guy right now in the spring semester of his junior year of high school. So he'll be a senior at Edna Carr next year. In the On3 industry composite, he is the number 29 overall player in the country at any position. He's the number 1 defensive lineman in the country and the number 3 player in the state of Louisiana. Lamar Brown, the offensive lineman from U High, Blaine Bradford, the safety at Catholic High, are the two ahead of him. But you're talking about a major prospect no matter which service you look at. On3 rates him 23 overall. Rivals rates him 24 overall. 24/7 rates him 63 overall. Not sure what ESPN is doing. They have him 181 overall. But he's got offers from everybody. LSU, Ole Miss, Florida State, USC, Oregon, Texas A&M, Auburn, Tennessee, Texas, Mississippi State, you name it. He's got all the offers. But this is a Louisiana kid who committed to LSU in June of last year. His teammate at Edna Carr for next season is also committed to LSU. Among the 6 commitments, that would be safety Aiden Hall. Teron Francis, another Edna Carr prospect, is currently in his freshman spring at LSU. He's signed in the class of 2025 as an early enrollee. So Edna Carr has been a real pipeline of talent to LSU, and Richard Anderson figures to be next. So we've talked a lot about this class, right? This 2026 recruiting class where there's this bumper crop in the state of Louisiana. And at the risk of being repetitive, because I know a lot of you, if you're an everydayer, thank you for being there, you've heard me say this, but when you look at LSU's championship rosters, it's pretty easy to see a lot of them, the cornerstone of their championship rosters were Louisiana guys. Even if you go back to the 03 championship, Saban's first championship, the cornerstone of that team was the 01 class. Michael Clayton, Marcus Spears, Marquise Hill, Andrew Whitworth, guys from the state of Louisiana who all decided they were going to stay home and play for LSU. And you can go through all of the championship seasons and see those underlying themes. You can look at the 2019 team. Of course, Burrow was a transfer, but Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson and Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Patrick Queen and Rashard Lawrence, guys from Louisiana who stayed home and became Derek Stingley, Christian Fulton became the core components of a championship team. So you look at this 2026 class in the state of Louisiana, Lamar Brown, is rated in the On3 composite as the number 22 overall prospect. He's the number 1 interior offensive lineman in the country. Blaine Bradford, number 25 overall, the number 2 safety in America. We just talked about Richard Anderson, number 29 overall. Aiden Hall, his teammate, number 55 overall. Jabari Mack out of Destrehan, number 82 overall. Bryson Martinez, an LSU commitment, number 92 overall. Kenny Darby, an LSU commitment out of Airline in Bossier, 149 overall. Point is, you got 6 players in the top 100 in the On3 composite, all from the state of Louisiana, and that's just scratching the surface. So you got to keep these guys home. We just saw a defensive lineman from New Orleans, the best defensive lineman, best player in the country for 2026, who reclassified to 2025, Jakeem Stewart, end up landing at USC in large part because USC dumped $2 million in NIL per year in his lap, and so he left. But it's all the more reason to reinforce, well, you got to make sure you keep a guy like Richard Anderson in Louisiana. Well, naturally, when Bo Davis left LSU for the New Orleans Saints, that was going to open the door for a lot of other teams to maybe get an open door into recruiting Richard Anderson and trying to entice him to decommit from LSU and open his options elsewhere. Well, I was able to have a conversation over the weekend on Sunday, as a matter of fact, with Bryce Brown. Bryce Brown is the head coach at Edna Carr, and he has done a magnificent job at Edna Carr. Like anybody who knows anything about Louisiana high school football, Edna Carr has become one of, if not the preeminent high school football program in the state. They just won a state championship. They beat my beloved alma mater, Catholic High, in the state semifinals. They are awesome. He has built a tremendous program there at Edna Carr, and they have been really good to LSU. That's one of those where if you're going to be the head coach at LSU, you better know the address of that school because they're always going to have talent that you're going to be recruiting. Anyway, so Bryce Brown and I had a conversation via text on Sunday, and Bryce Brown told me that he accompanied Richard Anderson to LSU for a 2-day unofficial visit, in large part for Richard to be able to sit down and meet Kyle Williams. He said, did Bryce Brown, that they met with Williams and the defensive staff for 2 days, and that Kyle was great. This is a quote: very personable, confident, and very knowledgeable. I think he will do great for LSU. Something else Bryce Brown told me is that the meeting with Kyle Williams, quote, reinforced Richard's commitment to LSU because other schools have been pressing since Bo Davis's departure for the Saints. He said, nonetheless, Kyle Williams did a great job presenting to Richard. The visit was eye-opening and refreshing. So a lot of high praise. And I will tell you candidly, my concern with hiring Kyle Williams was not Kyle Williams. I know that sounds kind of weird. It's just the unknown. There's a lot of times where coaches are given their first opportunity, it doesn't go well. I can look at Brian Kelly's first year. Brian Kelly's first year at LSU, when he didn't retain Corey Raymond, he brought in Robert Steeples. Robert Steeples was a high school coach, sound familiar, and then spent 1 year with the Minnesota Vikings as a down-the-line assistant. And then he gets first college job was the DB job at LSU, and it was a wash. He couldn't get the talent here. They didn't coach him up. I mean, it was a total mistake. You ended up having to bring Corey Raymond back. It's just to say that there is when there's an unknown, it creates uncertainty with these variables. So Kyle Williams, listen, if you want to go back and listen to the episode when Kyle got hired, we talked about this, but I'll give you the Cliffs Notes. Kyle's great. He's from Louisiana. He loves LSU. He played at LSU. He was an All-American, 13 years in the NFL, a 6-time Pro Bowler. He's got the skins on the wall. He made $57 million in his NFL career. He has done everything that the guys in his position group room at LSU want to be. So there's immediate credibility that goes along with that. But there is the point to say, just because you play, does it mean you can coach the guys? And also, can you recruit? And my contention has been that relational recruiting has never meant less than it does now because of NIL. And that's not to say this is what's going on with Richard Anderson, but it's just to say that, look, LSU had an amazing relationship with Bryce Underwood. They had an amazing relationship with Jakeem Stewart, and they ended up elsewhere because other teams went and dumped big bags of cash in their lap. So mostly, I think for Kyle Williams, it's going to be the player development aspect of this. That's going to be the most important part of this. So we'll see how that goes. But you got to have players to develop. And there's no bigger player in the state on the defensive line or in the country for 2026 than Richard Anderson. And apparently the 2-day unofficial visit with Anderson and his coach coming to Baton Rouge went very well and only reinforced Anderson's commitment to LSU. So a job well done, a hurdle cleared for Kyle Williams, and a big vote of confidence from the number one defensive lineman in the country and his head coach, which is an important figure in football in the state of Louisiana. That should be very encouraging for any LSU fan today. Okay, now, when LSU will continue through spring, when they get to the end of spring on April 12th, they'll have their final practice. No, it won't be a spring game. Well, Brian Kelly did take time to explain why they're not having a spring game. You'll hear that explanation in my reaction. When we continue, Locked on LSU, your team every day. The Armada Team of the Week is brought to you by our friends at Nissan and the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. Each week, our Locked On basketball experts are picking one team that stands apart. From top-seeded stars to the unexpected upsets, these guys showcase the strength and sheer power needed to push their team forward. This week's Armada and clear-cut Team of the Week, the Florida Gators. Not only did Florida grab the 4th 1 seed, but they are the nation's most efficient offense. When it comes to the Nissan Armada, they say, go forth and conquer. And that's exactly what the Florida Gators have done here. It's clear that our team of the week is out here ready to conquer the road ahead with confidence, just like you can with the all-new Nissan Armada or any of Nissan's outstanding vehicles. Take the Nissan Armada, Rogue, or Pathfinder, and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. Today's show is also brought to you by Fabric. Life moves fast, especially when you have a family. One day you're watching your kids take their first steps, and before you know it, they're off to college. That's why securing their future is so important. Fabric by Gerber Life makes it simple to get term life insurance that fits your family's needs. With Fabric, you can apply for term life insurance online, right from your couch. You could be covered in less than 10 minutes, and in many cases, no health exam is required. It gives you peace of mind. As a parent, you want to make sure your family is financially protected no matter what happens, and Fabric gives you that peace of mind. So join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to help protect their families. Apply today in just minutes at meetfabric.com/lockedoncollege. That's meetfabric.com/lockedoncollege. Policies issued by Western Southern Life Assurance Company, not available in certain states. Prices subject to underwriting and health questions. Brian Kelly will put the LSU Tigers through their 6th practice of spring coming up on Tuesday. That full practice is open to the media. I'm looking forward to being there, and we'll give you a full report there. And they'll be halfway or just about halfway done with spring at that point. And we know that LSU will punctuate spring ball with what will normally be their National L Club spring game on April the 12th, Saturday in Tiger Stadium. However, it won't be this year a spring game. Brian Kelly announced it will be a spring practice or event that's open to the public. Well, he explained why, Brian Kelly explained why he chose to go this route instead of a traditional spring game.
As I looked at the spring practice itself and the game, what was more important to me where we are as a football team was to get all of our players an opportunity to get reps. And sometimes you don't get the equal amount of reps in a spring game. We have some young players that need some practice time, and this will give everybody an opportunity. You don't have to worry about splitting the squad. You don't have to worry about some of the nuances that splitting it up and having 2 teams sometimes make it difficult for you to get the matchups that you want. I can simply go 1s versus 1s and have some really good matchups that we can test our players.
One thing's for sure. If you're going to see 1 versus 1s, you're going to test your players, and you're going to get a more competitive outcome, and we'd want to see that, no doubt. It's also worth noting that Brian Kelly's been a head coach for more than 3 decades, and at any point in his coaching career, if he wanted to do this format, he could have done this format. Why change now is a really good question. I don't doubt at all that there is some efficiency of what they want to accomplish that will happen with a practice instead of a game. One of the other things Brian Kelly said that wasn't in that clip there is that they also found that they used practice 14 to get ready for the spring game. So if the spring game, you just heard him say there, when you're dividing the roster, you don't really get ones-on-ones or however you do it. Maybe the spring game isn't an efficient practice where you don't get as many reps for guys as you want. And then if you use practice 14 to get ready for practice 15, then that's really 2 practices of the 15 that you're not using effectively. That makes sense. It does. That's also something Brian Kelly could have changed at any point during his 3+ decades as a head coach, but only now did he choose not to do it that way. I'm not saying that he's lying. I don't know. I'm just saying that, and what he's saying is a sensible explanation. It just doesn't make sense that you would all of a sudden elect to do this now when other teams are also canceling their spring games. I think part of it certainly could be health of the roster. Listen, there was the Matt Rule commentary. Matt Rule, who's the head coach at Nebraska, the reason Nebraska is not having a spring game, Matt Rule said it, is that he doesn't want other teams watching his spring game and then potentially poaching his backup players in the spring portal. If a third stringer goes and plays really well and another coach is watching, they may tamper, try to get that player to go into the portal, entice him to transfer. Brian Kelly was asked that point blank, but did tampering, the idea or possibility of tampering, impact your decision?
Wasn't worried about that. I mean, I think if you're going to lose a player, it's not because of what they put on film in the spring ball. It's because of what's happened, throughout the entire semester or year. I think that was just an easy soundbite to, get out from under having a spring game. That's just my opinion.
So, by the way, somebody show that to Matt Rule. But then again, the question persists. Why do you want to get out from under having a spring game? Why do all of these coaches now not want to have a spring game when it has been such a common thing and accepted practice for decades? And I'm not saying keep doing it just because that's the way it's always been done. I'm very much a believer in change for change's sake isn't good, but change for a greater good is perfectly fine, even if it makes us uncomfortable. Something else that Brian Kelly did say that I do think is cool is they're going to do an on-field autograph session with the players after the spring game. Look, I mean, candidly, I remember as a kid going to the spring game and then the autograph session on the field. I remember waiting in line to get Harvey Williams' autograph in 1990, Todd Kinchin, all those guys. It was a really fun memory as a kid. And most fans, unless you storm the field, will never have the opportunity to step foot on the surface of Tiger Stadium. So that's a really cool thing for a lot of people. And in a controlled atmosphere, I'm good with it. I think that's cool. I will say that, a year ago, LSU didn't have really a traditional spring game either. They had a practice where they worked on special teams, they worked on controlled goal line situations, and then they went into a scrimmage period, which is likely something similar to what we'll see this year. And I'm fine with that. That maximizes the work. For the most part, what matters most is making sure you get the most amount of work done to improve this football team that has so many transfers that are going to be key contributors, and to get them caught up as quickly as possible. So if maximizing practices 14 and 15, if to do that, it means you don't have a spring game, instead you just have a practice that's open to the public, okay, because the bottom line is I don't think, 50 years from now, any Ohio State fans are going to look back at whether or not Ohio State had a spring game in 2024. They're going to remember they won a championship. I have no idea what LSU did for a spring game in 2019, but I remember that season. So as long as Brian Kelly gets his team ready to play their best ball in the fall, I'll be good with it. But the explanation still does leave quite a bit to be desired. Okay, final break, come back. Quick tidbit, Kim Mulkey gives an update on Flau'jae and Anissa Morrow, and we'll give you a thumbnail preview of LSU against UNO at the box. Don't you move. We'll wrap up Locked on LSU next. Today's show is brought to you by Upwork. Scaling your business requires the right expertise at the right time. With Upwork, you can find specialized freelancers in marketing, development, design, and more. Experts ready to help you take your business to the next level. Upwork gives businesses flexibility by connecting them with top freelance talent across multiple industries, including IT, AI, web development, and marketing. Whether you need extra hands for a project or a long-term partner, Upwork makes hiring simple and affordable. You can find the right talent if you need help with a marketing campaign. Upwork can connect you with a freelance expert who delivers incredible results. It's fast and easy hiring. It's cost-effective growth. It's Upwork. So visit Upwork.com right now to post your job for free. That's UPWORK.com. Upwork.com to connect with top talent and grow your business today.
The NCAA tournament is here, and so is the Bracket Breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.
We'll get to a quick preview of LSU and UNO, but the LSU fans will certainly appreciate hearing this. Kim Mulkey giving an update on Anissa Morrow and Flau'jae Johnson, who have both been out recently with injuries.
Good to go. I think Morrow and Flau'jae are in a boot, but that's just, I don't know why they're still in it, but I guess they just keep them in it.
I love that soundbite. I think most people know the boot is just for stabilization to help aid recovery, so you don't roll your ankle or aggravate it. So that's why LSU is the 3 seed. They'll take on San Diego State, the 14, and then should they win, they'd advance to play the winner of Florida State and George Mason. Of course, the first 2 rounds will be at the Maravich Center. LSU will play Saturday at 9:15 p.m. Central Time. And Mulkey, though, obviously loves the postseason experience he's got on his team.
If you look at our 5 that have been starting of late, 3 have national championship rings. Samaya has 1, Poa has 1, and Flau'jae. Flau'jae started, and Poa and Samaya came off the bench and were big-time factors in the championship. So they have the experience. Morrow is Morrow. Doesn't matter if she was on that team or not. She's a walking double-double. And we're playing at home. Doesn't guarantee you any victories, but it sure is good not to have to pack this weekend.
4-time national champ. She's been to the top of the mountain. She knows what it takes to win in this tournament, and so much of it is you err on the side of experience in the NCAA tournament. Kim Mulkey's got plenty of it. Her team's got plenty of it, and hopefully they'll have Flau'jae and Anissa Morrow as close to 100% as possible. Kim Mulkey took a very calculated risk. She said, I'm not really worried about seeding. I want Flau'jae healthy. Whether you're a 2 or 3 is largely irrelevant. What matters is having Flau'jae healthy. So they sat her for the last 2 weeks. We'll see. Well, after this week, it'll have been 2 weeks, and we'll see if that ends up paying dividends as the Tigers try to make a run toward hopefully another Final Four and possibly the program's second national championship. Certainly feels like a year where it's pretty wide open, where we've seen USC, UCLA, South Carolina, Texas all hold the top spot in the country at various times. We saw UConn blow out South Carolina on their home floor. It feels very much like your draw matters, and it could be anyone's championship to take. So we'll see if the Tigers can go play their best and maybe make a run deep into this NCAA tournament. The baseball Tigers certainly hoping to do that in June as well. The next step on Tuesday night against UNO at Alec Box Stadium is 6:30 first pitch. UNO is 11-7. Remember, Blake Dean is no longer the head coach at UNO. Blake Dean left the role. Shortly before this season started, they promoted an assistant internally, but former Tiger Blake Dean being at the helm of the Privateers program for so many years was a big part of this matchup. UNO is 11-7 on the young season. They're 5-4 in conference play, and UNO swept a 3-game series this past week at Incarnate Word. This UNO team is pretty good offensively. They hit .324 as a team with 43 doubles and 26 home runs. Let me say that again for you. UNO has 26 home runs in 18 games so far. So this is a team that packs some pop. Now, the flip side of it is their pitching staff's not very good. UNO has a pitching staff with a cumulative ERA of 7.37. So their cumulative staff ERA is north of 7. But as a team, they hit .324 and they've got 26 homers. So LSU, same thing. This is very similar to what we said against Missouri this past weekend. You've got to be able to show up and throw strikes, because if you put guys on base, if you give them base runners with walks and hit batsmen, you're setting yourself up for potential 2- and 3-run blasts that can make this game far more uncomfortable than it needs to be. But offensively, LSU should be able to go have their way against a pretty limited UNO pitching staff. I will be so interested to see what Jay Johnson does on the mound in this ball game. It is highly unlikely. Now, I don't know what they'll do, but But I think it is highly unlikely that after Connor Ware pitched twice this weekend that you'd run him back out there in the midweek. And while we only saw William Schmidt pitch on Saturday, I don't know. After a week after Jay Johnson said William Schmidt's time extending in the midweek is likely done, I don't know that we see Schmidt get out there. What you'll very likely see, I think, is a lot of guys who didn't pitch this weekend get work. So remember, as we've talked about this, as you get into and through SEC play, you're going to start to see LSU really contract the amount of pitchers that they're going to use. Really, you're shrinking that bullpen. So if you look back to Friday, of course, Cade Anderson got you into the 7th inning in that game on Friday in the win. And after Anderson, it was Benj, Primo, and Cowan. But you started to see a lot of the same guys pitch. So you had Anderson, Benj, Primo, Cowan. You use those 4. Ianson started, of course, on Saturday. Then you had Ware, Schmidt, Primo, and then Evans. So that was the eighth pitcher that you used on the weekend. Then, of course, Shores started, which was number 9. Ware was back out there again. Rizzi became 10, and then you already saw Primo and Cowan. So you only used 10 pitchers on this weekend. You know, if there's 17 guys there that you like to get work and keep engaged, you're going to need to get guys like Rizzi and Cooper Williams and Grant Fontenot and Jacob Myers. Guys work on this staff, and this is the opportunity to do it. And you really need to identify your strike throwers. I'm going to continue to underscore that point. You know, this is a staff where we can be awed by the arm talent. When you got 8 guys that throw 95 or higher, that's really impressive. But it doesn't matter if you're throwing 95 or higher. If you can't throw it over the plate, you can't locate your pitches. Zach Cowan doesn't throw 95, but he's been one of your most effective pitchers because of his ability to command multiple pitches, including his great changeup, which is a 90-mile-an-hour pitch. So, or actually less than 90. So it's going to be one thing I'm looking for. I want the offense to continue doing what they're doing, and certainly you got a bad pitching staff you're going against, but I want to see LSU's pitchers command the zone and throw strikes. That's the key here. Who can limit the walks, throw strikes, and that's what I'll be looking for on Tuesday out at the box. Of course, we will be here after that game going live on Locked On LSU. So if you've made it to the end of the podcast here, make sure if you're on podcast, please subscribe. If you're on YouTube, smash the like button, subscribe, and hit the bell on YouTube so you're notified whenever we post a new video or go live. And remember, we will be live after every LSU baseball game. So we'll have your immediate post-game recap throughout this season. We'll look forward to seeing you here on Locked On LSU, your team every day.